Hello, guys, and welcome to my first ever episode of the podcast. I don't know what I'm going to name it. I think I'm going to call it the MacCast for now. I soft launched the idea of having a podcast with the Grammy video that you guys received pretty well, and now I'm making these videos, so here we go. Today's podcast is going to center around three big ideas. I'm going to talk about the girls going country. I'm also going to talk about J-Lo's psychotic, narcissistic documentary that was beautiful, but also just weird. And then I'm also going to open up the last section to kind of share my state of mind and talk about the video making process and what I am going to be making on this channel next. Mainly just for myself and scheduling purposes, but also as a teaser as to what exactly it is I'm building on this channel this year. First things first, we have to talk about all the pop girls going country, particularly Beyonce, Kacey Musgraves returning back to the genre, and a little bit of talk about Lana and why I think she's going to do a great job with the upcoming Lasso album. So we're getting down to the South. We're going down to some country talking. That's my Southern accent. I'm so sorry. So Beyonce just utterly shocked the world. I mean, I thought she stole the Super Bowl this past Sunday when she revealed two singles as well as Act II, Texas Hold'em, 16 Carriages. I don't think I've ever seen country music, and this may be just from my own ignorant experience as a pop person, but I don't think I've seen the general public. I mean, I'm talking about corners of the globe. I'm talking about Irish dancers in Ireland dancing to Texas Hold'em. I don't think I've seen country music embraced at these sort of levels since like maybe Taylor Swift in 2009 in the mainstream. So I just find it really cool that what Beyonce's doing, essentially democratizing the genre in a sense for people who normally would not be into that. It has me curious about many different things, ranging from how she's going to be categorized at the upcoming Grammys, because she will be nominated. There was earlier controversy this week because Apple Music had mislabeled the genre of Texas Hold'em and 16 Carriages as pop, which created a discourse about like whether or not the Grammys are going to try to label her album correctly in the right categories. It's a charged topic, and I think it's way too early to think about that per se, but that sort of framing already ahead of time, especially if the rumors are true that Act III is going to be a rock album, that's something that I will be keeping on my radar personally. Before I go into the tracks in depth, which I will, I'm going to just freeform talk about how I feel about them. No script, which is pretty neat. I want to talk about the rumors surrounding Act II and what many believe it will be. Some believe, according to a Dumois rumor, that this is going to be a film project akin to Lemonade, where Jane Campion, director of Power of the Dog, which was a prominent Western film that came out Oscar nominated, pretty decent movie. The hot rumor, according to eagle-eyed fans who noticed the yellow car in the trailer, is that a follow-up of sorts to the iconic telephone from 2009, roughly 15 years ago, will be released alongside Act II or teased within the movie itself. Gaga is rumored herself to be releasing music this year. I do not know if it's going to be just solely Joker stuff or not. She also teased that she's not doing a rock record, so who knows, maybe it might be a country record, which would just add to the pile of girls going to country. Telephone was an extremely formative experience pop culturally for me speaking. I had just started to get into stan culture myself. I'm outing myself as an old person, as an old head, because Telephone had come out in 2010, I believe. I was either 13 or 14, and I was really getting into standing pop girls and ingratiating myself in music culture, not just within the pop spaces, but I also leaned into rap, R&B, country. I was trying to figure out who I was as a music fan. And Gaga was just such an intersection of different genres that I found interest in: jazz, country, rock. That's why I owe a debt to her musically, and why I think it's wonderful that Beyonce herself also was a very formative artist for me. I feel like her blend of R&B and pop and the way that she curates sounds and producers, that's what keeps her relevant. That's what keeps her a world-class talent. That's why we're still paying attention to her, and why she is this, not just a brand or an ideal to strive towards, but an icon in the space. I recall reading a tweet from someone saying that Beyonce's projects, like Renaissance, essentially was a reclamation of genres that Black and queer artists have sort of molded and formed. I mean, in the case of Act I with House, Act II, a lot of country music owes a debt to soul and blues music, and Act III, it being a rock album itself, knowing Elvis's history, anyone who's like really into music history, definitely check it out. Like, Elvis really did crib a lot of his style and panache from Black artists. In a way, it's not just a reclamation of sorts for Beyonce to dip her toes into this genre, but it's a celebration of the forefathers of these genres. And to see this happen in Act II is going to be particularly interesting because the country space has not been welcoming of artists that don't fit the stereotypical mold that we would imagine for country music. I mean, many years ago, just 5 years ago, there was an antagonistic relationship that they had with Lil Nas X when he really created a crossover country hit with Old Town Road. The Country Music Awards themselves just nominated him for Best Musical Event of the Year. He was not able to be nominated for Best Country Song or any other meaningful categories because they just didn't want him there. And the Billboard country charts had kicked him off. It wasn't until Billy Ray Cyrus intervened that he was reinstated on those charts. So 5 years removed from that, with Beyonce's current situation, the world is watching to see how exactly the country music community of America really does respond to Beyonce's work. I hope that they don't openly reject it or try to snub it. I feel like this is a great moment for crossover, to introduce new voices to the genre, to encourage a new generation of stars that don't fit the mold, to really revitalize it. The country music space is arguably one of the most hard spaces, I think, in general, for people who really just don't fit the mold of that to break out in. I truly think that depending on how things are handled on a cultural and a commercial sense, that Act II will really revitalize the genre, and seeing the other pop girls dip their toes into it, which I will also discuss, is fascinating. Before people say that it seems random that Beyonce and Lana Del Rey and eventually other artists who normally don't do country music, why they're jumping onto this genre, there are many reasons behind why I believe this is happening. For one, commercially speaking, country is a bankable genre. I find that it continues to generate sales. I mean, last year, looking at the charts alone, Morgan Wallen and Luke Combs, they were charting pretty high with their own individual singles. So the country sound itself is selling. On an artistic level, I feel like it's a challenge, considering the return to the sort of recession pop sound that we have within mainstream artists. I believe we're not long for a pseudo Black Eyed Peas-esque sound revival, considering the state of the economy and the world at large. This isn't a knock against people who are in that electro dance house stage of their career, but it's not really a space that allows you to lyrically express yourself. A lot of the expression comes from the production. Country itself isn't production focused. For the most part, stripped down country is the same 4 chords over and over again, and a focus on telling your truths and your stories through the lyrical medium, using idiom, metaphor. You know, you allow your audience to really register and steep in the words that you're singing. You can have fascinating delivery. I don't want to generalize the genre itself, but I feel like the appeal to country from my own perspective and the perspective of people in my life that enjoy country, it's just the ability to really tell succinct stories. I mean, I feel like Taylor Swift was a genius for finding her footing in country, for using that as a platform to become the pop star that she is today. Her country albums showcase her ability to storytell, and she was able to cross over that into the pop space. So going from pop to country, I do believe for certain artists who have not really reached that level of storytelling mastery, it becomes a challenge to sort of shift over and focus on a more narrative-based storytelling style in their lyrics. I believe that Beyonce herself has been a master of narrative. I mean, Lana Del Rey, who I'm also going to discuss, has also shown key prowess in songwriting and just being able to be a storyteller. I think being a storyteller as a musician, some of it comes from the lyrics, and most of the times, especially if you're in the pop space, it comes from the visuals. So this is just going to be a fascinating blend to see where these artists really come into their own in that sense. But enough stalling, I will discuss each of the songs individually. Texas Hold'em is predicted to hit number 2 at the time of this recording, and possibly number 1 the following week, which is really impressive considering it's a country track and a surprise release. This Ain't Texas is such a killer opening line. The song really opens with its chorus, knowing that that is the crown jewel of the song. There's like a loose and open, free energy that makes the song feel very sing-along. The usage of ad-libs like the woo and the haze are very hooky, and they add an interactivity to the song. One thing I really like about this song is that you're encouraged to sing and chant along. The rhyme scheme in this chorus is genius. I love the way that she pairs Texas with Lexus, the way that the downs, the repetition of that, the way that it pairs with the round repetition. It feels very intuitive. The rhyme scheme is something that you almost complete with your mind before you've even finished listening. One thing that I really admire about this track is how smooth she sounds. Come pour some sugar on me, honey, too. That sweetness is so vocally telegraphed that you really feel the warmth. But that sweetness is countered with the playful, don't be a bitch, come take it to the floor now, which I think is the hookiest line in the entire song. The song really feels lived in. It feels like a song that has existed for many, many years. It's older than it actually is. I love the use of the southern tropes, from the dive bar to the red solo cups to the tornadoes in her city, really just giving Texas a character. The harmonizing really makes the song work, and the layered vocals, again, they add a warmth and a depth to the song. The pre-chorus itself is ethereal, the oohs, and the way that her voice really, it feels like it's dancing from the right to the left and spinning. It feels like it's following the instructions that she's singing. Her vocals really elevate the song. And we need to talk about the chorus again because it's just an earworm. Don't be a bitch, come take it to the floor now, and I'll be damned if I cannot dance with you. It really makes you want to get up and get your spurs up and head down to the old rodeo. But really, the highlight of the song for me, the part of the song that just keeps me repeating this back and forth, has to be the outro, where she really slows down the song to let us relish the strings, the vibes, the energy, her vocals, the way that she sings fur, spur, boots. It just tickles the ear. Of the two singles, this is the more mainstream one. This is the one that I believe will amplify the era, similar to how Break My Soul did for Renaissance. It's 16 Carriages, on the other hand, that's more lyrically driven as a song. I preferred it on my first listen. It's this more anthemic track that handles some dark themes and really strips back down to focus on what she's saying. It's a condensed biography, which is a trope in the country genre where myth-making yourself is a rite of passage. I felt like the carriages that she's singing about themselves could represent the tour trucks that she has each time that she heads out on the road, or perhaps the first few years of her life where she was being primed to become the superstar that she is today. This song really speaks to the sacrifices that she's made. The first verse is definitely about the grind. She was just 15 when Destiny's Child was formed, and her teenage years were more or less about the grind and leaving home. The pre-chorus definitely touches on that, being in the back of the bus in a bunk, underpaid, overwhelmed. The first time that I heard her sing Only God Knows, I actually had misheard it as Only God Knows, which I interpreted meant she only really had her family and herself, which would still fit the themes of the song. Like, if you listen to it again, like, I just heard Only God Knows instead of Only God Knows. The second pre-chorus alludes to the song having been written when she was 38, so back around in 2019 or 2020, which was confirmed by Bey's mother herself, who said that she's loved the song for years. The second pre-chorus now takes us to a more present-day setting versus her being 16 on the road. This one talks about her missing her kids. She's grown up through the track of the songs, yet the themes of sacrifice and giving herself up to create art, that permeates throughout the song. It's something that has never really ended for her. The context has shifted. She closes out the song on a bridge and an outro that really recontextualizes the first verse, but completes it. She's doing this for legacy. She's doing this for her personal truth. She's doing it for art. She's doing it for herself. She's doing it for her family, and she's doing it for her fans. She understands now the full weight of the sacrifices that she made in her early years, and now she's reaping the rewards of it. But the act of reaping, the act of collecting what you've sown is still labor. That's why I think I prefer this song a little bit more than Texas Hold'em, which I adore. I adore Texas Hold'em. Both of these songs, if the album really does hew close to the dimensions portrayed here, we are in for possibly one of the best country records of the new millennium, and I'm excited to hear that. I feel like the controlled lyricism, the understanding of the hallmarks of what makes the genre work, what makes it catchy and hooky, the history behind herself, you know, her personal history and how that influences and bends art to her will. I feel like this is going to be one of the most introspective and revealing albums that she's ever made. And if she does not win Album of the Year, if this album really is this high caliber, you know, 90 plus Metacritic score thing, and she does not win Album of the Year, like, they better Return of the King this and give her the Album of the Year Grammy for Act 3. I am just utterly stunned by how brilliant these two tracks are, and I think the bar has been raised for the country crossover era that we're witnessing right now. Another artist that is not necessarily a country artist, but someone who has dipped their toes into country. Because Beyonce did Daddy Lessons, which honestly is a perfect prelude to the kind of music she's making now. Another artist that's doing it is Lana Del Rey, who is going to release her next album, Lasso, after having been snubbed by the Grammys. I truly believe Ocean Boulevard. It deserves something. It does make sense that Lana would make a country album. I feel like her voice, her tenor, the way that she writes does actually accommodate the genre. Many people are frustrated with her shift to country. I don't think anyone really is upset, but the people who are memeing how upset they are, I feel like they are the people who have been waiting patiently for eons for her to return back to her sort of lust for life, born to die sort of trap sound. And I do believe that some of those elements or some of those songwriting elements will bleed into this album, as they often do. But I'm really excited for this. The lyricism and depth that she had on Blue Banisters, which I was super happy to cover. It's one of my more successful videos and something that I recorded at a time where that album really touched my sentimentalities. It touched the sensibilities of who I was and the reckoning of that time period for myself. And I believe that Lana will do an amazing job on Lasso, and that was hinted. It's been hinted. There have been breadcrumbs that she was going to lean towards that direction throughout her entire discography, but most recently through that beautiful cover of John Denver's Take Me Home Country Roads that she just did. The way that her voice, you know, warbles, the depth of it, her tone. It almost feels extremely overdue that she hasn't done a country record. Another track that really sells me on the idea of a country Lana record would have to be Let the Light In with Father John Misty. That track really does take elements from the genre and, the sweetness of her voice. Lana has a very unique timbre and tenor. She has the ability to really shape her voice around instrumentals and vocals, but mostly about her emotion. Sometimes I find that her delivery fights against the instrumental to underscore her dissatisfaction or her emotional state. So I'm curious to see which producers she lines up for this record. I'm hoping that she reaches beyond Jack Antonoff, despite the fact that Jack Antonoff could do a great job. Zach Dawes, who I adore as a producer, produced the cover of Take Me Home Country Road, which has me faithful that I think she's going to bring him back. I'm not sure. Apparently it's a one-off. Details are murky, but I feel like bringing him back would be great. Okay, so I googled it because I realized that since I don't have a script, I can cheat. Lana Del Rey did mention that Jack is producing much of Lasso as far as the interviews have gone. He followed her to Muscle Shoals, Nashville, Mississippi over the last 4 years, so I am kind of excited to see what kind of production he brings to the country space. I do think that this album has been in the works for some time. She teased all the way back in August 2022. I recall when I was doing research for my Ocean Boulevard video that at one point, many people did believe that Ocean Boulevard would have been country because she said, I hope you guys like country music. But of course, we know how the record turned out. Lana is a very talented songwriter. That's one of the reasons why I adore her music. I consider her to be one of, if not the greatest American songwriter living at this current moment, which sounds insane. It sounds hyperbolic, but I swear, if you guys look at her older works as Lizzie Grant, as May Jailer, if you look at her work now, the depth of which she writes from, the bench of her emotions, I cannot wait to see that be utilized in a country space. Whether or not that experimentation really bears the fruits that we expect it to doesn't really matter. I'm just curious to see how Lana Del Rey's voice, how her perspective bleeds into the genre, much in the same way that I'm excited about how Beyonce's will. I feel like pop girls bring a unique perspective. Again, I believe country is such a malleable genre because to most people, to outsiders, to people who don't listen to the music, heck, to me at times, we think of the exterior superficial things, wearing cowboy hats, wearing the boots with the spurs, wearing the denim jackets, going on a horse, going, yeehaw! It's that sort of thing that, like, it's those imageries and iconic Americanisms behind it that a lot of people imagine, but in reality, it's one of the more pure forms, at least from a songwriting perspective, because I do not want to diminish electropop. I believe electropop is a very, there's like rockist attitudes. I'm not going to get into this. This is going to get into an insane rant. Country is like a cornerstone culturally of America, so it's tempting. It makes sense why over the years, Madonna was one of the pioneers in jumping from pop to country. Recording a country album or dipping your toes into this genre when you're viewed as an outsider or someone who's right on the cusp of being in that genre, it makes sense because it's your way of stamping your brand on American culture. It's a way of you recontextualizing your relationship to the country and to the art form of music, because I do believe that country, it's so archetypical, it's so abstract if you really think about it. You really can just mold it into a storytelling tool. I believe that music and its relationship to genre, whether genre in general, movies, music, video games, etc. Genre is a tool. It is not necessarily a category. I don't believe it's just a category. I think genre is a paintbrush that you can use to tell your story in a different style. Like if dance and house pop are like, glittery pens, country is grabbing a worn down pen and just scrawling down your thoughts onto a discarded, ripped up piece of paper and putting it in an envelope and mailing it to a loved one and hoping it gets to them. I feel like that kind of imagery of working class, that imagery of being down and tumble and dirty and just essentially, roughing it creates this like sense of authenticity, at least the idea of authenticity, where things are dirty and not polished and clean. It's fascinating. I could go on and talk for 15 minutes about what authenticity means and why something that appears polished and clean and perfect and sanitized can be just as authentic as something that's like rough and tumble. I mean, like, the act of arranging music and an image and tone to tell the story that you want, what really is authentic? What is authentic? I feel like the retreat that many artists did take in 2016 started and most successfully done by Gaga, by the way, with Joanne. Even though that was a mixed bag in itself, I felt like that was kind of a retreat, an act of insecurity of sorts, that like, oh, my previous art forms were not legitimate, because Justin Timberlake also did the same thing. Another record of that time that I enjoyed it at the time, but like looking back, Younger Now by Miley Cyrus definitely hewed close to that sort of mentality that a return to a more acoustic or country sound would also render or like reorder the public's view of the artist. I mean, like, Miley herself had tried to use Younger Now as a reset after the Bangers era had all but kind of considered her persona non grata to a certain subset of her fan base. What I hope for most with all of these girls going country, and it is going to be a trend, I expect more and more artists to sort of like dip their toes into the genre. What I do hope is that this comes from a place of authenticity rather than the artifice of creating an image of authenticity itself. I'm not going to be the arbiter of what is correct and what is right per se, but like what I am saying is that people will know what isn't real. People will call you out on what feels fake and disingenuous. So, like, this time around with Beyonce and eventually Lana and Kacey's upcoming releases, like, of course these are going to be quality releases because these artists know who they are. I'm currently working on a video essay for Kacey's seminal piece, Golden Hour. I'm not sure when it's going to come out. It should come out later this week, but I did want to touch on her upcoming record, Deeper Well as the song that she released alongside it, the visuals, and just kind of like a vibe check on it. First things first, the title track that she released alongside its beautiful music video, just a stunning, very healing track that feels more like a natural evolution of the music that she made on Golden Hour. The collaboration team that she worked on for that album, as well as Starcrossed, which many want to forget, but I don't want to forget. I love that album. It's really fascinating just seeing the evolution, seeing her continue to work with the same collaborators. I view this as like the trilogy closer for that sort of set of collaborators, though I do think she'll continue to work with them for a very long time. Deeper Well seems to be a breakup album, though it's not necessarily pointed at her most recent ex so much as the mentality and mind state that she was in during her Saturn return, which started around the time Golden Hour actually had come out and ended by the time she had divorced her husband, which is a neat detail. I really do like verse 2 and the first chorus because that one's pointed towards the people in her life that are good at wasting her time. That one line about having dark energy and something that she can't unsee, I felt like that was really pointed. There's a lot of astrological millennialisms in this album, which I find fascinating because I have friends who are really into that. Verse 3 talks about how she used to wake and bake and her relationship with substances, which she was very open about in the creation process of Golden Hour. Golden Hour had actually been created on LSD. Here we have a progression where she's talking about how she's getting rid of habits that are really good at wasting her time and how she's sort of getting older now and taking better care of herself, which is, it's a sort of confession that you would not expect an artist to make on a record. I feel like this album is going to be a hybrid of her first two records, which were very earnest and honest country records, and the sound of the third album, which was Golden Hour, which was way more abstract. One thing I really liked about Golden Hour was how simple and universal the lyrics were. There was still a rich amount of detail, but on Deeper Well and parts of Star-Crossed, there's more specificity, there's more density to it, which takes away from the more poppy sound that she had developed and puts it squarely back in the country space. Just from the cover art itself, I feel like there's going to be very rich thematic parallels between this record and Golden Hour. Instead of her face being obscured by a fan, she merely holds up a flower, which has a very similar pink pigment to the fan that she's holding on the cover of that record. So I believe they're going to be deeper sister records than, say, something like Golden Hour to Star-Crossed, which also interplay into each other both from a production and thematic purpose. But I do feel like Deeper Well is a better continuation of the self-love and actualization themes that that record possesses. Golden Hour was about appreciating the world. I think Deeper Well might be about appreciating the self and finding a deeper love through that and through the environment. I look forward to further discussing that record when it comes out in the middle of March. I believe it comes out 1 week after Ariana Grande's Eternal Sunshine, so the 15th. So expect a video essay review of some kind that weekend. The next few minutes are going to be me talking about J-Lo's new movie, This Is Me Now, which is supposed to be an album-length music video, but stops abruptly and is just a total disaster on every single front, both from its aesthetics to the acting to some of the narrative choices that were made throughout the picture. There are some interestingly fun moments, and weirdly enough, I feel like I understand who J-Lo is as a person and an artist even better now. But that movie has broken my mind. So for the next few minutes, bear with me. I will just talk about what happens in that movie. To talk about This Is Me Now, we need to talk about how insane this project is. It costs $20 million. It is an album, a narrative film directed by Dave Meyers, who actually directed the Me Taylor Swift video, which explains why it looks the way it does, and a documentary called The Greatest Love Story Never Told, which is based off a bunch of letters that Ben Affleck had written her that never were shown to anybody, but now are being shown, so it's ironic. It's supposed to be a sequel to the record This Is Me Then, and as a musical album divorced from imagery, it's not really that bad of a record. I actually do think that it's one of her better records. It really does remind me of the early aughts R&B pop that she made. Many of the songs actually feel like direct echoes to music that she's made in the past, or perhaps continuations of certain themes. The record itself is centered around her reunion with Ben Affleck. I don't know the full Bennifer story. I do not care to know for the Bennifer story, but apparently it's a big deal because my mom, who was around for the Bennifer times, tells me that it's kind of insane that they got back together. But before I get lost, this is what the movie's about. So apparently there is a Puerto Rican legend about two star-crossed lovers from feuding tribes, Olita and Taru, which honestly has influenced J-Lo's entire life. She builds the narrative around the story. I'm assuming she's talking, or she's just basically making it a metaphor for her and Ben. There's a ridiculous, insane car crash accident scene where she and her lover on a biker, I'm assuming that's Ben, just crash and they flip, and it looks like a Marvel movie, and it's insane. And then she starts singing. Then we cut to like the present day where she's sharing this dream with her therapist, who is played by Fat Joe of all people. And he's like, girl, you cannot blame your problems on astrology. And she's all like, oh, no, it's definitely astrology, which is important. Astrology is an important part of this movie. J-Lo ends up in an abusive relationship with a Libra, and she's convinced that it's astrology's fault, that she thought that they were a good fit, and her friends are like, don't do it again. She ends up having like 3 weddings in one music video song dance number, which I thought was one of the more interesting dynamic sequences in the film. There are some interesting visuals, but I felt like many of it looked like AI generation, so that kind of took away from the mystique of the work. She was like in an abusive relationship with a Libra, and then she ends up having 3 unsuccessful marriages with a Pisces, a Virgo, and a Cancer. I shit you not, this is a plot, look it up. And like up in the sky, like the ancestors in Mulan, there's like this zodiac council made out of celebrities including Jane Fonda, Post Malone, Keke Palmer. I think Kim Petras is there. They're all different zodiac signs, and they're going like, damn, JLo is really just going through it. It's like absolutely insane. People accuse her of being a sex or love addict, and she has to go on this like self-love journey, which is insane. She sings this really flawed song, Broken Like Me, which I just didn't feel like it worked. And then she somehow reconnects with her younger self in the Bronx, gives her a hug. It's kind of like giving Katy Perry in Wide Awake, but not as good. And then she's like, okay, well, I love myself, and now it's time for me to find love. And then she starts going to her friend's wedding because she has a cynical friend who's been dunking on her the entire movie. He gets married first. She has to gracefully accept it, and hummingbirds lead her back to her true love, which is implied to be Ben Affleck, and the movie just abruptly ends. Like, I don't think she covered the entire album in this movie. I think it was supposed to be the entire like album, but then she like ran out of money, or maybe like there just really wasn't a story to be told. It was like extremely jumbled. There's some cool visuals here and there, but this movie gave me a nightmarish headache. Like I feel like anytime that JLo came close to sharing something that was concretely truly like her and authentic, she would just pull back. Like the sequences where she talks to her younger self did not feel genuine, but the scenes where she's trying to repair her heart with and flowers, like there's this scene where she's trying to repair her heart factory, or when she's like really inside of her like mind's eye, I felt like that was the closest we got to getting to know her. There's some baffling narrative choices. I mean, I felt like the Zodiac Council just did not make any sense to me. It's very absurdist, which I think is the redeeming factor of it. I feel like it was very camp. Some of the sequences in the film feel like Doritos commercials, like Super Bowl Doritos commercials, scored to her music. Like the artifice of everything, the avoidance to actually share anything genuine speaks more about her than anything else. I feel like JLo fans are really going to enjoy this. I feel like I have a better understanding of her as an artist, like her priorities. I do think that it is a very genuine and earnest documentary-ish kind of look into her mind. But at the same time, I just felt kind of bad for her for most of the movie, just in the sense that you can tell that she's on the cusp of really sharing something that's like deep and emotional, but she pulls back because it hurts too much. I feel like the emotionality of the film and the picture, how earnest it is something that we really don't see nowadays. It felt like a train wreck that I just needed to keep going and going. I was kind of waiting to see what this was all adding up to, so I felt like the ending was kind of a rug pull for me. I wish that there was more to chew on the film. It's very preposterous, but you can also tell that the creative control that she had over the project, since she self-financed this project, is there. There's no real feeling that a corporate hand was controlling this film. There's no like ridiculous product placements in the storyline. It just feels like truly unfiltered, unrefined. I can't really grade it. I genuinely could not give it like a 0.5 on Letterboxd. I didn't grade it at all. It's just so bafflingly confusing. It's almost like the antithesis to Lemonade. And I don't mean that in like a purely mean way. I just really felt like it felt like the opposite of what Lemonade was. I feel like the honesty comes from the artifice in this one. I also did have to appreciate the song Can't Get Enough. Again, that's the song where she gets married 3 times. It's a really catchy, well-written song. I feel like it could do well on the charts. Maybe, I'm not sure. I don't think JLo's a charting artist anymore, but it is definitely one of the more radio-friendly bangers on that It is truly something you need to see to believe. I feel like how I described it and how I talked about it just sounds like absurdist gobbledygook that doesn't make any sense, but I swear if you guys see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. And finally, this is kind of like a freeform section where I'm just going to talk about where I think I'm going to go with this channel, and feel free to chime in the comments where you think I should go with this channel, but I am currently slating out some video essays. I think I'm going to aim for a consistent Friday or Saturday release. I'm doing golden hour sometime this week, hopefully, if I do find pockets of time to release this. I will also be doing Sweetener, Eternal Sunshine, Deeper Well, a Renaissance retrospective, and Beyonce's Act II review. All while sort of like recording these sort of podcasts. They're going to vary in length. This one's just really long because I'm trying to find the correct length for this format. A lot of you guys complain that I don't make long enough videos, so this one's roughly 40 minutes, I believe, maybe even less, based on whether or not how many I like cut out. I do like the fact that this is a more freer format. I don't really have a script. I'm just speaking from like my brain and my heart and my soul, much like J-Lo and This Is Me ... now. This podcast will discuss things that I just do not have the time to render a really concept or realized video about, but also kind of like color in. I feel like this is more like bonus content. So people who watch or listen to this podcast, there will probably be inside jokes from these and ideas and possibly repeated phrases that show up in my later videos. As for the possibility of having guests on these podcasts, I'm working on that right now. I'm going to create a sign-up sheet for anybody who really wants to like just have a quick conversation with me over Zoom and consents to being recorded, not face-wise, just audio. And yeah, I'll have people call in. So for now, I'm just kind of figuring out the format. I'm extremely grateful for anyone who tuned in and stayed in this far. A quick shout out to my members, my subscribers, anyone who's made it this far into the podcast. Thank you so much for giving me roughly 40 minutes of your time, or shorter if you're using the 2x speed, which I use whenever I listen to podcasts. And I hope your commute to work or whatever laundry you were doing, I hope it all went well. And I'll see you next video, proper next video.